Self-sealing gas tanks. Yes, I had them. All my aircraft had self-sealing gas tanks. If ever there was, I was kind of fussy about safety, as you know from people having trying to attack my cities and my government centers and my vehicles and even my people. I'm a little bit fussy about my security, just a little bit. And also other safety features, also from my working projects and my other companies where safety comes first. I love my Japanese people. They're like, safety first. um, they really embrace me, and I love them very much. But anyway, on all my tanks, I had some really good. I build aircraft and ships and battleships and other stuff. That's what I do. I'm an inventor and a builder and a creator and a leader and a pretty great person. Anyway, so all my aircraft had these tanks where if the fuel line breaks, because there was this rubber hose that between the fuel tank and the aircraft, there was a rubber hose, and this rubber hose, would flex around and sometimes it would break. And if it broke from engine twisting or anything like that on the aircraft, basically there's a fuel pump inside the fuel tank, and it would basically spray fuel onto a hot engine. So basically, if that and the hoses, they only lasted like 6 months or a year or something like that, or 4 months. Like, they didn't last very long before they would break, because the rubber was like not so good. I think they lasted maybe a year or two or something like that. Like 8 months. Every 8 months you had to check them, but basically, if they moved around too much or anything like that, or if they got shot, this hose would basically break, and and the fuel pump would be on full blast and just basically going right into spraying right forward of the engine, right on the exhaust, whatever, and usually that would start a fire, or could start a fire. Or if it got shot or something like that, it'd basically spray fuel all over the engine, and you know how jet fuel or high octane aircraft fuel is, even a spark and anyway. There were a few times when a few aircraft would catch on fire and stuff like that. So we changed the tank to where if too much fuel went through, it would basically seal up the hole. And the pump would just go, and it would suck that ball bearing closed or whatever. It's just a ball bearing on the thing, and it would sit here, and or something. There's some sort of way. I forget exactly how they did it. I think it was a ball bearing, and oh yeah, that's right. Except when you go upside down, the engines would cut out because it was a gravity thing. But I had a spring or something. I forget exactly how we did it, but it was something like that, where it was a spring and a ball bearing and stuff like that, and basically, and we changed it later on to a different way. But basically, there are self-sealing tanks, so where if the engine twisted too much, or if you get shot or something like that, because sometimes the engine mounts would break on those aircraft, because they were also using nitrous oxide. They're pretty high-performance aircraft. Anyway, aircraft is kind of like one of those things. It's kind of weird, it's just like building a car. And that's what I used to do. So the engines would twist, and it would stretch that hose, because that hose would be like a year old or so. It usually had to be like a year or two old before it would actually break. But basically, it would stretch the hose and then catch on fire. And I had a safety setup, or a safety system, where the tank would self-seal. And later on, we did other kind of self-sealing tanks, where if the wing got shot, there was something that would seal it, or something, or some way we were working on. Yeah, we were messing around with it. I was like, I basically built aircraft like most people build cars. It's like what you do. I built battleships, I built APCs, I built guns. I manufactured. I didn't sell to just anyone. Anyway, eventually this black guy came in, and his name was Anton, and they tortured and killed one of my people, and then he would sell to anyone. I mean anyone, especially if they're going to use a weapon. So they started selling the guns to everyone and stuff like that, and it got kind of nasty because everyone had a gun and anyone had a gun. His name was Anton, and he was a black guy, and Anton, he was a black guy and supposedly rich or whatever, but realistically, they just went into one of my factories and they basically tortured and killed my head person, and they really didn't sell them. they really just kind of like raided the factory floor pretty much, you know, and took everything they could get, and then tried to go back and say that they own the place. Anyway, though, it didn't really work out for them like that. But anyway, you know, they basically, just like going to Ford and basically putting a gun to the guy's head and say sign it over, and then going down and taking all the cars out of the factory. That's pretty much what they did. And then they came back a couple days later and said they owned the factory, you know, and this and that. Anyway, but it didn't really work out for them like that. So anyway, though, but basically I produce and manufacture tanks and all kinds of other stuff, and I had self-sealing tanks and all kinds of stuff, safety stuff. Anyway, so that's a very safe person, a very safe, you know, everyone loved to work for me and everyone loved me. So anyway, and this guy Anton, you know, basically if you were a rich person and you owned like some aircraft company or anything, he would walk up to you and he'd just shoot you, or get someone to shoot you. You know, they just use a sniper rifle and be like, well, he's dead. And then they would go in and say, well, he signed it over to me. And that's pretty much how they did everything. That was basically how they did everything. And that's Anton. And like I said, they went to my Belfast shipyard, which was Lucifer Star ships and Star Sea ships. And they basically tortured and killed my my head guy there, my head manager there, and then they repainted all the signs to say Anton, and Anton was black, and supposedly French, and this other guy. So anyway, but he really wasn't. He was just some guy that raped and killed a lot, and I think he got killed eventually. I don't know. He might still be alive. I don't know. I mean, these guys, you know, in one town they're Anton, in another town they're Jimmy Bobob Behead. Another town, they're Frank. You know, I mean, they're not really, you know, they're basically just people who ran around with guns and tortured and killed a bunch of people and then put up some fake news stories and said that they owned the place or something. So, anyway. You know, like I said, GMC was an aircraft manufacturer, and, you know, my Chinese or Mitsubishi branch of aircraft manufacturing. And GM4 was it. We built some aircraft, and then eventually we started building cars and some other stuff. So anyway, that was my Japanese Chinese division, and also part of me. So they worked. It was still me. Just you know, that's why I got named GM4. I named it. I named a bunch of other stuff is because I had to name these vehicles. So I was like, well, I guess we'll call it this. You know, and it was just kind of like spur of the moment, like, you know, what else am I going to name it? You know, and all this stuff like that. Anyway, then they were manufactured and produced, and then eventually, later on, somebody tortured and killed my manager and started selling to just anyone. And it was discovered and found out, and then people didn't like it much, so. Because they were just killing and raping.